In the 17th century Scottish Highlands, travelling long distances on foot was simply part of normal life. But the average person didn't have access to maps or compasses or even timepieces, and most of the Highlands during this time period didn't even have proper roads or bridges. So this begs the question, how did the Highlanders find their way across these wild lands? Well, I decided to dive deep into the subject and create a 3-part video series on Highlander navigation. So join me as I learn from the natural world, from history and from Gaelic culture, and then in the final episode I combine all I've been taught and embark on a solo natural navigation challenge across the Barren Moor. In this first episode, I'm joined by Tristan Gooley, a world-renowned expert and best-selling author in natural navigation. Together, we take a trip through the skies, moors and forests to see what natural signs our ancestors may have used to help them find their way. So, stay tuned. So this subject of Highlander navigational skills was the highest voted topic over on my Patreon page this year. So huge thanks to all my patrons who voted. And because it was so popular, this is why I've decided to turn it into a 3-part video series so I can share as much as I can in a digestible YouTube way. But if you want to learn even more, then I have extended editions of all my videos over on my Patreon page, as well as a bunch of other perks. There on Patreon is also the best way to support my work in general. So thank you to everyone on Patreon. You know who you are, you're all legends. Now, much like most of the topics I cover in my Highlander series, unfortunately, the historical records tell us pretty much nothing on how Highlanders navigated across the land. So really the best we can do is educated guesses and experimental archaeology. Now, when it comes to the topic of historical navigation, I knew I wanted my first step in this learning journey to be learning more about what nature can tell us, its tracks and signs, and how it can help us find direction. And I've long been a fan of the author Tristan Gooley, so it was an absolute honour when he agreed to come up to the Scottish Highlands and film a video with me. Now, we also filmed a podcast together, which you can find over on my second channel, as well as the Fan Dabby podcast. But without further ado, here is my day with Tristan. Here's everything I learned on how to read nature signs in the Scottish Highlands, from the skies to the mountains to the moors and into the forest. So, enjoy. What would you say is the main difference in just terms of seeing the landscape and traveling through it? What's the difference between your modern map and compass that people might be familiar with the way that our ancestors would have traveled through the land?
The big difference is it's a difference in philosophy. Our ancestors didn't assume something in their hands would give them an answer, so the answer had to come from the environment through their senses, and that just meant tuning in to everything around them.
What sort of signs and things can you see, or what do you think our ancestors you see that I can't see with a modern navigation perspective?
Well, we can think in terms of scale, and I encourage people to think top down.
Okay.
And so if we can see the sun as we can now, we want to give that a moment of our time and then arrange the landscape around that.
Yeah.
So we're mid-morning, the sun is going to be close to southeast, so we can get a sense that if that's southeast, south is there, north is this way. And then we can actually kind of paint a map in our minds of saying, okay, we've got a ridge of sort of high ground here, we've got a sense of direction, and we're just starting to paint a picture a little bit like a modern map in our heads. And then what happens is the reason we start at the top is that the weather may change, and if you lose the sun, you've not accepted a gift. And I learned this the hard way many years ago. I would be looking at all these fantastic clues that we're going to look at. Suddenly you lose the sun and you think, oh, why didn't I take advantage of that?
So you can pick that, then at least you can pick a reference in the landscape that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and
that goes away.
That's what I do, and I encourage people to do, is if there's a gift from the sky, it might not be the sun, it might be the moon or the stars or planets. Once you know some basic techniques of how to use all of them, sun being due south in the middle of the day from anywhere north of the tropics is the fast way in, but there is a whole art to using the sun, of course. And then we get a general sense, but then something I like to do as well is maybe lock in one or two really big landmarks.
Okay.
So a summit being a good example.
What about during the night? What do you think our ancestors were looking at in the stars and the moon?
The stars, almost everybody who did any significant journeys on foot in the past would have been able to find their way using the stars. Today people think it's complex because they're confusing it with celestial navigation using a sextant, which is a technical skill, and it's good fun, but it takes quite a lot of training, whereas just finding direction using the stars is really straightforward. The key thing to remember is, because of the way the Earth rotates, there's an axis of rotation, and if we imagine that the North Pole going out into space, it points at a star. We know it as the North Star or Polaris, and it doesn't appear to move. And all the other northern stars rotate anti-clockwise slowly around it, once every 24 hours, very roughly. And what that means is, with a little bit of practice, we start to recognise certain shapes will point us towards the North Star. In truth, you can find the North Star using every single constellation. Some are easier than others, but the method and the approach is always the same. I liken it sometimes to looking at a map. If you open up a map of your home country and you see a shape, you know how to get from that shape to your nearest city. You go, oh, I recognise that shape, so I go that way to find my city. It's the same in the night sky. You recognise certain shapes and you go, oh, when I see that shape, there's a very popular one known as the Plough in the UK, the Big Dipper in the States and many other places, and there are pointer stars that take you towards the North Star. But every single constellation can be used to find north or south.
Okay, so yeah, I often think this with obviously 300 years ago there was no night pollution, there was no TV, there was no real things to be entertaining ourselves in the night. I'm sure people keeping guard in their cattle would have spent hours and hours just sitting and staring at the stars. What about the moon? Can that help us find direction?
Yes, the moon is one of my favourites, but it can be, there are one or two fast methods, so let me share one with you. A crescent moon is telling us where the sun is, and the sun is always east or west of the moon, roughly. So the crescent is pointing east or west. So if we draw a line that touches the horns of the crescent and continue that down to the ground, we will be looking roughly south from the northern hemisphere. And that's a really nice, fast but rough method. The closer the moon is to the horizon, the more approximate it becomes. The higher the crescent is, the more dependable it is. But once you've tried it a few times, you remember it the rest of your life, and you can use it in 2 seconds.
Okay, so you mentioned it was best to start from the top. So you start with the sun, the moon, the stars, but what next? What's after that?
We come down a layer and we give some thought to the wind and clouds.
Okay.
And this, if you look at any ancient civilization or way of journeying, and indigenous people to this day, a sensitivity to the wind is never far from their minds. There's one very practical reason: major weather changes are preceded by a shift in wind direction. So if your daily habit is to tune into what the wind is doing, you're far less likely to get caught off guard. And we've got to remember, journeys hundreds of years ago, there's real danger in getting caught out. But from a navigational point of view, we tune into what the wind is doing. The wind we can feel, but we also look at the direction the clouds are moving. And the two are often similar, but they're rarely identical. And it gives us a different way of reading the landscape. So we can see from shapes of clouds, for example, out there we can see the top of a cloud is just very gently being pushed left to right, telling us that in that part of the sky the wind is moving left to right. Over here we've got the same effect. It's very subtle today, which is a good thing. It's a sign that there isn't big difference in wind speeds with height, but we've got a similar thing where the tops are just very slightly being pushed over right to left. You see, it's very, very subtle.
Like a crest of a wave just
being
cut off.
Nice example just there. I call it the shear effect, and that's telling us that as we look that way, the winds are moving right to left. So we've got this convergence telling us that the winds are broadly moving that direction. We tune into the sun and say, okay, we've got a west-southwest westerly trend in the wind. And this is a little bit like the sun. It's something we bank, because if we lose the sun, but we've stayed tuned into what the wind is doing, there'll be many, many times where the wind will not give us a direction to the degree, but it can give us a good enough steer. If we're aiming for a big landmark, there'll be times if you're in a deep valley and you're looking up through woodland where you can barely feel the wind at all, but you can still watch the clouds. So I teach people treat the two as sort of like cousins. They're not the same. And that way, if we choose to, we can tune into the wind. If the wind isn't helping us, we can tune into the clouds. But it gives us a general steer, and just as importantly, it keeps us tuned to what the weather's doing, and any big changes will be heralded in the cloud shapes and the wind direction.
Wow, okay. Yeah, so I imagine our ancestors, obviously they didn't have meteorology, they didn't understand, or they probably didn't understand, you know, high pressure, low pressure, all these different things. But again, just by living, if you're just all the time outside, you know, being a herdsman, tending the cows, unconsciously they might have used different language or different story base, but you would think that they would be tuned into, especially changes in weather.
We see the big ones bubble up in weather lore. So mares' tails and mackerel scales make tall ships bring in their sails is one example. And these are certain cloud types. So mare's tails is cirrus that's being blown quite fast by an upper wind, and that's one of the heralds of a front coming in. Okay. As you say, they wouldn't have talked to each other in terms of fronts, but they would recognise the mare's tails.
Yeah.
And then there's some very, very simple patterns that all our ancestors would have been familiar with, I'm confident, which is if clouds are getting steadily lower, it's a deteriorating weather picture. Yeah. And then as with all of these types of clues, it is a jigsaw. So you don't look at one cloud and go, okay, that's the forecast. You go, oh, I've noticed some mare's tails and the clouds are getting lower, you know, with each hour, and the wind has shifted. Okay, that's a picture. That's quite a clear picture that we've got something blowing in.
Okay, so if we're talking about signs from the top down, we've covered the sky, we've talked about what signs we can find there. What can we see down here on the vegetation level?
Well, this is where natural navigation gets really, you know, fascinating and intricate, because I like to think of the sky leaving footprints on the ground. So the sun, wind and weather more generally are leaving clues all around us all the time. So let's take the sun. It's giving us most of its light when it's the middle of the day, when the sun is due south. So what we find is the plants will be different on two sides of anything standing out. Like there's a rock next to you here. We find the heather is doing better on the left side than the right side, telling me more light is reaching the left side, so south is more likely to be out this way.
Side, yeah.
And whenever we look around the landscape, we will find any bumps. It can be absolutely anything, a rock, it can be a tree, it can be a hill, will cast a shadow. So we find those asymmetries in the plant life. If we think about the weather, that's leaving really distinct footprints, particularly the wind. If you lower your eyes on any grassy landscape, you will see the wind's footprints. And what we find is there are different time scales, but the simplest one is the long-term wind, the prevailing wind direction, will be seen in the low-lying grasses. So as we look out here, can you see most of the grasses are bent from right to left?
Yeah, this way.
The prevailing winds in the UK are from the southwest, between the southwest and west, depending where you are. That's telling me that southwest and west are out this way here. Okay. Now, we can match that with the sun now, but if the sun goes, the grasses, you know, you can navigate for miles very comfortably just using grasses.
Cool. Nice. So what else can you see here?
Yeah, so the thing I'm always looking for when I'm map making is change. And we look down here and we can suddenly see the heather is struggling and grasses are dominating. So that is telling us with certainty something different is going on here. Now, I don't know for certain. We'd have to get in and have a closer look and possibly even talk to locals to know the full story. But this is a place that's not getting as much direct sunlight, so heather's finding it slightly harder. But if we put the pieces together, with the grasses are telling us most of the strong winds are coming from that direction. This looks like it'd be a really nice shelter spot, you know, whether it's deer or other animals. So if I had to interpret that patch, I would say sun's finding it harder to get there. The animals are quite liking it. So the heather's finding it harder. So it's telling us about direction, but also giving us a story about what's happening.
So we've come closer to the stream to see if it can tell us any clues. This is such a heavily grazed area. Just the sight of the trees can tell us they are going somewhere where the deer can't get to. So that's either a crag, high up rock, or usually a steep bank of the river. So that can be, I've used that before just for finding water, but I suppose there's a clue right away, linear feature that you can see from a distance. If there's trees, then
that's it. That in ancient navigation terms, linear features are gold dust. It's actually quite rare in any societies, however ancient, that people would roam and follow totally new routes. We're nearly always talking about journeys that have been done before and ideas are passed on.
Passed down orally, stories and directions, or just gone with your elders showing you the way.
Yeah, and so what we tend to find is the directions will include linear features. It will be along the lines of, you know, head south until you hit the ridgeline, or head south until you hit the river or the stream. follow that downstream until, you know. So that's where we find the clues using the sky and the weather and the land allow you to do the first bit. Then you pick up the linear feature, then you're
there.
Absolutely. But if you get in real trouble, rivers and streams are very helpful, because the old navigator's joke goes, they always lead home, if not to yours, then to somebody else's.
Got a boulder here. Has it got any stories to tell us?
Yeah, boulders always tell a story, because they're out there in the elements 24/7, and any asymmetries in the weather will leave their imprints on the surface. And my favourite and first thing to look for on boulders are the lichens. And we'll nearly always find lichens doing well if the air is fresh. If you don't see any lichens, it probably means you're getting near a city, because the air quality is not good enough for them. But here in this lovely Highlands fresh air, lichens doing incredibly well. And they're all telling us something, but I'm looking for big differences. And one general rule, which is not hard science but works for me, is the brighter a lichen is, the more likely it's had lots of direct sunlight.
Okay.
And the way I remember it is, if a lichen looks like it's trying to give you a bit of sunlight back, it's probably had sunlight, so it tends to be more common on the south side. So what we tend to find on the south side of boulders is lots of bright lichens, sometimes look like splotches of bright paint. And then when we go round to the shaded side, we'll still find some of those lichens, but they're not doing quite so well. They're not so dominant.
Okay, so we've come off the barren moorland into the forest, another environment that Highlanders would be travelling and navigating through. We've lost the advantage of being able to see far. What clues can we get from the forest and from the trees and the vegetation here?
So we're still looking for footprints from the sun, wind and weather, but we're looking for more dramatic ones, because they've got to fight their way in through the trees. And we've got a lovely example here of a storm-felled tree. And what we find is a storm will go through a woodland and just rip through it and knock down loads of trees in the same direction. And the direction will vary depending where you are in the world, but the key is to tune into the trend. So whenever you see a tree that's come down from a storm, you just make a mental note using other clues. You go, okay, that's come down from the southwest, it's pointing northeast, and then you pick up the trend, and then they're one of the best forest compasses. Trees, like all green plants, they need sunlight, of course. It's their breakfast, lunch and dinner, so it'd be weird if they're symmetrical, and they're not. We find more tree on the bright southern side, but actually we find patterns in every single part of the tree. There are over 20 ways you can navigate using a tree. But you start with this big shape. There's more branches and more tree on the sunny south side, and then you look for slightly cuter patterns. Like on the south side, branches grow closer to horizontal because they're growing out towards the sun. On the north side, it's subtle, but they grow up towards the sky, because that's the only place they get their light from.
So Tristan, I know someone in the comments is going to say moss always grows on the north side of a tree. Is that true? Is it as simple as that?
I love it when people ask this, because it's a chance to understand what natural navigation is really about. Moss, like any other organism, doesn't care about north, south, east, west. We have to understand what it really cares about, and that's moisture. So moss only tells us one thing, that an area stays damp. So to read it for navigation is not an easy skill. It's actually an advanced skill. So let me give you some examples. At beginner's natural navigation, we ignore all mosses below knee height. As you can see all around us, the mosses are just thriving, and that's just because the ground is damp and moisture is evaporating out, and the moss can thrive. So it's not telling us anything about direction. Flat surfaces will also allow water to gather and stay there. They stay moist, the moss loves them. Nothing to do with north or south. Rough textures will slow rainwater down. Moss thrives there. So what we've got to do is look for places that are off the ground and smooth, and it's really quite hard. So I love lichens. They're much easier to read. Moss is advanced natural navigation.
Okay, so tune into one of your books for that. So the wildflowers, can they give us some clues as well, Tristan?
Yeah, the wildflowers look pretty to us, but they're actually trying to attract the insects for pollination, and they stand a better chance of advertising themselves to the insects if they reflect lots of light, lots of the sun's light, and we know most of the light comes from the south. So we find most wildflowers will point south, some between southeast and south, but again, you just look for the trend, and it can help you over a wide area.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Tristan. Thank you for showing me the tracks and signs in this environment. We could make hours long of documentaries with all the stuff that we've covered, and really we're still just scratching the surface. So where can the folks who are watching find out more about your work?
Thanks so much, Tom. It's been really great fun sharing some of these skills with you in this wonderful part of the world. And if people would like to explore the wonderful art of natural navigation more, there's information on my website, naturalnavigator.com, my books, my courses, and my newsletter. Lots to explore there.
Okay, so I have one final question for you. Now with this newfound insight of seeing how Highlanders could or would have navigated not using any modern devices, do you have a challenge for me, a suggestion of a challenge that I could try out to test these skills?
Yes, Tom, I'd like you to find a water source following a route you've never followed before, just using clues and signs in nature. And I want you to stay really sensitive to the moment that you can tell you're getting close to the water. It shouldn't be when you see the water. Indigenous people can sense water using nature's signs and natural navigation long before they see it. So good luck.
Okay, so find a water source that I haven't been before. We'll see. Let's go. See what happens.
Good luck.